session on the great books, where once a month for about 90 minutes, we have essentially a doctoral level seminar on one of the great books. I know that there are a number of new students joining and a number of new participants. So I thought I would take a few minutes to go into some detail about the great books. But before I do, I just want to note what I noted at the end of our last session of Humanity Rising, that as we are convening today, right now, the funeral service of George Floyd is taking place in Houston, Texas. And I think, given the fact that all of us are navigating our way through the pandemic, all of us are in some form of lockdown. All of us have borne witness to that senseless death and have given witness to the hundreds and in fact thousands of events, protests, acts of activism around the world since then. I think it's just appropriate that we take a moment and pause and empathize with the family and with the larger Black community around the essential mantra of this time, and that is that Black lives matter. So I'd like to just take 60 seconds and just meditate in any way that you would like, maybe attune to your heart and feel love and compassion with all sentient beings. 60 seconds. Good, thank you. I raise the death and funeral of George Floyd because the book that we're now contemplating is a book about how we both navigate through turbulence, but how in the midst of the dark night, whether it's political or economic, cultural, personal, communal, how do we activate our immune system in such a way that we barricade ourselves from diseases? And not only diseases of the body, but diseases of the heart, diseases of the soul, diseases of the mind. We normally think that what you have to do is take a pill or go on some dietary regimen, or maybe go on a meditative retreat, all of which sometimes work. But over the centuries, people have observed a very peculiar phenomenon in human beings. Since time immemorial, that sometimes we can go to a place, Sometimes we can frequent a teacher and we heal spontaneously. It's called a miracle. That without a pill, without actually doing anything observable, human beings have this fascinating capacity to heal themselves. You think of a place like Lourdes, which has been known for centuries as a place of healing, and people flock there by the millions. And a certain small statistical percentage of the pilgrims are actually healed. It's a very mysterious faculty that we humans have. And yet, paradoxically, while we all know this to be true, most of us don't think we can heal without some outside agent. It's rather extraordinary. And so, what I'd like to do for just a few minutes today is contemplate this deep mystery through one of the great books, I believe, of contemporary times, and that is You Are the Placebo by Joe Dispenza. You know, when Georgie and I were choosing our books last fall, I obviously had no idea we were going to be in the middle of a pandemic. But as synchronicity would have it, I can't think of a better book on planet Earth right now for you to read and ponder as deeply as you can. Joe Dispenza's book, You Are the Placebo. Now, what do I mean by a great book, first of all? There have been millions and millions of books written, but there's probably only a couple hundred even great books. Just like there have been thousands and thousands of leaders, but only a few, only a handful, maybe a score only are called great. Alexander the Great, Catherine the Great. When a book is called great, it's great because, first of all, it speaks to people everywhere. No matter what your culture, no matter what your religion, no matter where are you in time, actually, a great book speaks to the human soul. A great book addresses issues of nobility. You think of the Iliad, the opening lines of the Iliad, sing, O muse, of the wrath of Achilles. The wrath of Achilles speaks to everyone who's ever fought in war. And probably most profoundly, what makes a great book is its capacity to transform lives. Think of the Bible. Think of the Quran. Think of the Bhagavad Gita. Think of the Analects of Confucius. Think of the Dhammapada by the Buddha. These books shaped entire civilizations. These books have profoundly transformed countless lives. Because these books, and what makes a great book great, is it confronts you as an intelligence all its own. It may only be words on a page, but that page is a living intelligence that reaches right into your heart and grabs it and addresses it and challenges you to think afresh and reorient your life. If we would truly internalize the fact that all of us are our own pharmaceutical firms, we are our own drugstores, and that if we can activate that power within, unbelievable energy, health, abundance, well-being would ensue. There's many things that one obviously wants to say about this, but let me start with what is a placebo? Ultimately, a placebo is that which gives us a sense of possibility. And it was actually initially discovered by an English doctor back in 1799, seeking to disprove some quackery that was going on. People were going around the farmers markets and selling these long poles. And they said, if you stand next to the pole, you can heal your rheumatism. And the English doctor said, this is crazy. This is nuts. And so he took regular poles that he cut off the trees and fashioned, and he gave them to ordinary people and said, these are going to heal your rheumatism. And he was shocked. A good percentage of them were actually healed. Now, everyone just take a moment and take that in. It wasn't the pole. It was their belief in the pole. Every major study now in the United States and most of the world in these big pharmaceutical firms is tested against placebos. It's either double blind or triple blind. Double blind is when the doctors know, the patients do not. Triple blind is when neither the doctor nor the patient know what is the placebo and what's the real pharmaceutical. And the pharmaceutical companies have to do better than the statistical average of the placebo in order to get approval. If you give someone a placebo and you name it an obscure name or something that rhymes with something that they're familiar with, it'll work better than normal statistics. Blue placebos work better than red placebos. Expensive ones work better than inexpensive ones. And what they've discovered about placebos is they have three characteristics. First of all, if you're used to taking a little white pill for your headache, that conditioned patterning from your past, if tomorrow they give you a little white pill, but it's not an aspirin, you're going to believe it's an aspirin, and your body is going to produce the chemicals that do away with your headache. There's been all kinds of studies that show that this is true. The second thing that is characterized by a placebo are your expectations. If the doctor tells you this pill is going to cure you like nothing else on the market, your expectation will activate your internal pharmacy, even though it's a sugar pill. And thirdly, what constitutes a placebo is assigned meaning. If the doctor explains that this is going to activate your melatonin and that's going to trigger your hypothalamus, and then something else is going to happen in your pituitary, you assign meaning to that little sugar pill that he's now going to give you. And he may not even know it's a sugar pill because he's in a triple blind study. But his assigning of meaning to that little pill is going to enhance your capacity to heal. They've done studies on depression and anxiety and more of the psycho-emotional illnesses, and the placebos are generally able to cure about 80% of the people, particularly of depression. And for a long time, they wondered, what actually is it? If it's mind over matter, maybe the mind just sort of dismisses things. But they've done these studies on Parkinson's and related illnesses, and they find that it's literally the case that your body, if you're in a particular sense of possibility, mentally, emotionally, your body has the capacity to produce almost any kind of chemical. Think about that. And the reverse is true. You know, there's all kinds of stories of these Southern preachers, you know, down in Alabama or West Texas that drink strychnine and nothing happens to them. So the placebo, the power of the mind is quite extraordinary. They've even done studies with dental patients where the doctor tells the patient, I'm going to give you some morphine. It's going to knock that jaw right out, and you're going to just be fine. And they don't give them any morphine, but the patient thinks they've got the morphine. And then what they've done is they then inject the patient with anti-morphine. And all of a sudden the pain comes back. Because the morphine that your brain is manufacturing, your hormonal system is manufacturing, is actually real morphine. And if you inject anti-morphine interceptors, you stop the morphine. So the capacity of the mind to produce matter out of nothing but the mind is quite an extraordinary state of affairs. If you think of all the ailments that beset all of us, the epidemics of diseases, like the pandemic, and we're all victims in one way or another, completely needlessly. We actually don't need the vaccines. That's the message of Joe Dispenza's book. You are the placebo. So the question is, how do you do that? If it's mind over matter, what do you have to do with your mind to create your own pharmacy. To understand that is a lifetime. What I'll do in the next few minutes is just to give the most superficial of descriptions of the process that Joe Dispenza describes in his work and in all his teachings. One of the things I admire about Joe Dispenza, probably more than any other contemporary teacher, is that not only did he heal himself, when he was 23, he was participating in a triathlon. And I don't know the details, but he got hit and run over by a truck. And the net result was that his back was broken in about 6 places. And they told him that the only way he was going to really walk and ambulate is if he got steel rods put in his lower back. And he decided not to do that. He decided that he was going to heal himself. And 12 weeks later, he walked, get up, take up thy bed and walk, said Jesus. Joe Dispenza took up his bed and walked, perfectly healed, by visualizing his own healing. And now, as a result of his work, hundreds and hundreds of people are being healed of every conceivable disease. He may be the only contemporary teacher that I know about where that is true. And everything's being scientifically measured and quantified. Because for Dispenza, science is the contemporary language of mysticism. I consider Joe Dispenza to be the first post-axial teacher. If you think of most teachers, they're all caught up in the jargon and in the language of a past tradition. Joe Dispenza is teaching the deepest of mysteries, but he's doing it through the language of science that anybody anywhere can understand. And as he says over and over in the book and in his courses, it's just a formula. And it's based on physics. So let's, for the next 10, 15 minutes, let's talk physics for a minute. Because if you understand contemporary physics, you'll understand the ground of mysticism and the formula for healing. Nassim Haramein is a physicist today that is in the process of creating the equations for the unified field theory. He has a Resonance Institute, Resonance Academy rather, and he has many YouTubes I would recommend for those of you who don't know him. Nassim Haramein, great physicist. And he describes reality by leading us in the following sequence. Every human body has 100 trillion cells on average. Every one of those 100 trillion cells has 100 trillion atoms. At the center of every one of those atoms is a little proton. If you blew a proton up to be the size of a grain of sand, a little speck. The atom would be as big as the dome of St. Peter's Cathedral, 42 meters across. That's how small a proton is. And if you go down to the bottom of the bottom of the bottom of the bottom of the proton, as far as they've been able to track it, you get these little things that are called Plancks. And these Plancks are so small in relationship to the proton that if you blew up one of these Plancks to the size of a grain of sand, a little speck, the proton would be as big as here to Alpha Centauri, 43 trillion light years away. That's how small these little Plancks are. And what Nassim Haramein has discerned about these Plancks is that they oscillate. Every 10 to the 43rd fraction of a second. Think this thought now. Take 10 and add 43 zeros of a second. The gazillions and gazillions and gazillions of Plancks in every cell of our bodies are fluctuating between the void and who we are. Reality is not smooth. Reality is like a motion picture movie. It's a series of frames. And the frames are moving so fast that you think it's all one, but every fraction of a second, every part of our body is disappearing into the invisible realm. 50% of our lives, we are in invisibility. We're waves. We aren't particles. And if we understand that reality, that's the key, says Dispenza, to healing. Now, let me put it another way. As you all know, because everybody learns this now in grammar school, certainly in high school, quantum theory has determined that what we used to think of as an atom, you know, with the nucleus and electrons and the protons and the photons and the quarks and everything swirling around, sort of like a solar system, that's just not true. What Heisenberg and Niels Bohr and the great physicists of the 30s and 40s discovered is that a particle only emerges when you put your attention on it. That the center of the atom is a swirling wave. But as soon as a physicist starts to measure it, it condenses into a particle. And as soon as your attention is taken away, the particle dissolves back into the field, dissolves back into the wave. We spend most of our lives focused entirely on the particle. And what Joe Dispenza teaches is that we need to be spending significant amounts of time aware that we're just a wave. Now, why is that important in relationship to the process of healing? It's important in the following way. The more you're concentrating on yourself as a definite, finite being, the more you're susceptible to the laws of three-dimensional reality, depth and height and space, width, the material world. The more you habituate yourself to the material world, the more you're locked into time, space, and causality. And that's why most people don't heal. They've become habituated to their wounds. Something happened 25 years ago that traumatized them in some way. And they still live their lives in relationship to a previous trauma. That trauma takes energy. That trauma takes time. That trauma preoccupies one's thoughts. And if we can move into another space, shift from being a particle to a wave, we move from a three-dimensional reality into a 4- and 5-dimensional reality. Because it's in the wave where complete, unlimited possibilities reside. In the wave, the particle can be anywhere simultaneously. It's really an extraordinary thing. So if we have this understanding that reality seems finite, but it emerges out of the background, the void, the blackness, the wave. That's the fundamental understanding, according to Joe Dispenza, that we need to be inculcating through our meditations every single day. Because the more comfortable we can get in dissolving our particularity into just simply being in the void, where there's no one, there's no place, there's no where, and there's no time. We have then the possibility of the second stage of what he teaches. And that is to use the power of mind, thought, to move into the void with a certain intention. It's like a TV set. You flip one channel and you get CNN. You flip another channel and you get BBC World. If in the void, sitting in the void, which Dispenza defines as intelligent love, your mind can create a frequency into the wave, into the field of possibilities. And simultaneously, with your heart, you begin to experience the gratitude and the sense of abundance that you will feel when that new possibility materializes. That's the key to the placebo. We're all particles and we're all waves simultaneously. If in your meditations you can dissolve your attachment from who you are to where you are not, and slip into the wave existence. And with your mind, begin to create a frequency around an intention. You're sending out literally electromagnetic waves into the universe. And the universe is totally interconnected. So every thought you think goes everywhere. And just like when the TV set goes from CNN to BBC World, if your frequency goes into what you desire, and you can synchronize your heart, which is attracting it. The thought is electromagnetic. The heart is magnetic. The thought goes out to the frequency and the heart draws it in. And you work on that day by day by day by day by day. From Dispenza's vantage point, that interconnectivity between strong intention and elevated emotions centered in the heart is the key to becoming your own placebo. Remember the way I defined placebo at the beginning? It's a sense of possibility. You actually believe the doctor. You think that you've just received the morphine and you can go through the operation because you believe it. That's your mind and that's your heart. And it doesn't have to happen when you get in an accident. It can happen as part of the way you live your ordinary life, which means that the key to well-being is creating the conditions for brain and heart coherence. Brain and heart coherence. I've been spending a lot of time doing the heart coherence. In Humanity Rising, we have several of the speakers that are talking about the science of heart coherence and the emerging discoveries that heart coherence combined with intention is an extremely powerful force in the world. Heart Math Institute did a study. They had a group of people who were experienced in prayer. And at a distant site, they had vials of DNA. And they told the practitioners, with your intent, see if you can get the DNA strands to unravel. And they intended and intended and intended. Nothing happened. And then they said to these practitioners, prayer practitioners, don't intend anything. Just simply feel gratitude. And they felt as much gratitude as they possibly could, and nothing happened. Then they said, combine the intent of unraveling the DNA with the emotion of gratitude. And when they combined clear intention and elevated emotions, pop went the DNA. We all know where our hearts are. And I would encourage you every day, even if it's for 2 minutes or 1 minute or 3 minutes, even if you put your hand on your heart, go through a practice of listening to your heartbeat. Just quiet yourself. So you can just put your attention down in the middle of your chest and literally feel and hear your heart beat. And keep your intention on your heart. And experience gratitude. Just simply for being alive, that your heart is beating. And all kinds of good things are going to happen to your health. How do we connect with the void, though? That's the question. How do we, where in our physiology is the receiver and transceiver set for the void, for the wave, for infinity? That's the pineal gland. And one of the really profound teachings of Joe Dispenza is to train people in activating their pineal gland. Do you know where your pineal gland is? It's right, if you just can feel or sense where the top of your throat is. It's between the top of your throat. It's right sort of between your ears toward the back of your head. You know the Fibonacci golden circle that goes here like a shell? Most of the entire universe is on the Fibonacci golden mean sequence. You do the Fibonacci circle for your brain. The pineal gland is exactly where it starts. Exactly. The pineal gland is about the size of a grain of rice. Very small. But it essentially is your third eye. It's right at the back of what they call the Eye of Horus. It's the pineal gland in birds that allows them to fly for thousands of miles and never get lost. The pineal gland is what connects every human being to the larger infinity of things. So one of the practices that I'm engaging in on a daily basis, actually, is centering my attention on my pineal gland so that I can access the void, the infinity, the wave. If you can simultaneously hold the beating of your heart in infinity, where all there is the beating of the heart, there's no body, there's no place, there's no you, there's just the beating of the heart in infinity, where nothing exists. Not you, not the city you're in, not the planet, not the solar system, not the galaxies, nothing. darkness. And in that darkness is the beating heart. You've connected your heart and your pineal gland. You've connected the two basic components of meditation, which is attention at one level, but awareness on another level. Dispenza, in all of his workshops, is increasingly spending time on the process of healing by teaching people the techniques of activating their pineal gland so they can connect with the void. That's the gland. That's the third eye. That is the antenna inside every human being that connects us with the void, from which we receive signals from the cosmos as fractals of the cosmos. And our heart. And you bring those two into coherence, and your brain and your heart begin to cohere as one, you're going to start creating your own pharmacy. And it may not happen in an instant. If you're suffering from maladies and traumas that go back 30, 40, 50, 60 years into your childhood, it may take a little while, because as Dispenza says, you've got to generate thoughts and emotions that are stronger than the thoughts and emotions that are connecting you to your wounds. You've been in an accident. You've had someone close to you die. You've been through a divorce. You've been through being fired at your job. You've been through unemployment. You experienced racism. Someone close to you shot senselessly through gun violence. Those are deep traumas. They don't go away just by wishing it so. You have to cultivate enough heart and mind coherence that your thoughts and your emotions are stronger than those that connect you to your wounds. And if you can do that, and Joe Dispenza has a very, very compelling formula that I would urge everybody to at least try. Because I'm telling you, he's on to something fundamental. And people are being healed of virtually everything imaginable by going through his practices. He was his own placebo. And he tells each and every one of us, we can be that too. Now, having said all that, I want to close with the great but. We're seeing it with the pandemic, actually. We can have all of our intentions. We can be as heart coherent as we possibly can be. But the gradations of the reality within which we live and have our being are infinitely complex. It is not just our intention operating in the universe. in the realm of infinite possibilities, there are many intentions and many contradictions. So we need to be humble in the face of the mystery. Sometimes you can intend as deeply as you can, but that doesn't mean that reality is going to bend to your intention. It may, but it might not. As quoted in the scriptures, the horse must be made ready for battle. But it is God that gives the victory. Ultimately, human affairs, human history, is a messy, meandering pathway. We're witnessing in the United States what happens when someone's intent seeks to break the country. That's what we're experiencing with Donald Trump. And his intention as the Joker to wantonly destroy and seed chaos is a very strong intent. Where do we go? Who amongst us has an intent that can supersede that? So sometimes the universe zigs and sometimes the universe zags. And your intent can be like a sand on the beach before the waves. So I want to be cautious as I close here that we not have too facile an understanding of how people heal. And the final message is that in spite of the complexity, there are real opportunities for us to do much better than we currently are in healing ourselves, strengthening our immune systems, and making sure that we are empowered in every way that we can to navigate through an increasingly complex reality. In the end, we don't have to take the pill. We can create the pill within. That's the central message of this book, You Are the Placebo. We all are our own pharmacies. Thank you, everyone. And now I'll turn it over to my distinguished colleague from the beautiful city of Budapest, Dr. Georgie Szabo. It's always a pleasure, Georgie.
Oh, thank you, Jim. Thank you so much. It's just another beautiful presentation of yours. Wow. First, I'd like to say a big thank you to you about the great definition of what a great books are to you. And I would like to add maybe one word, which is inspiration. It's like a great art. Any great art, if it inspires you, then you will need to find the reasons that why you get inspired. And just following on that thought process, I think you are a living great book. You really are so
You're very kind.
No, it's not. It's the truth. And actually, I will circle back to what truth is. But let me just refer my comment and question relates to this segment of Joe Dispenza's book. He said towards the very end, "It is my hope that after reading this book, you will realize that the ultimate belief is the belief in yourself and in a field of infinite possibilities. And when you merge the belief in yourself as a subjective consciousness with your belief in an objective consciousness, then you are balancing intention and surrender. It is tricky, though. If you oriented, that's called trying, you will get in your own way and always fall short of your vision. If you over-surrender, you will become too lazy, apathetic, and uninspired. But if you combine a clear intention with an uncompromising trust in possibility, then you will step into the unknown. And that's when the supernatural starts to unfold. I think that you and I are at our best when we are in this state of being." And I'd like to put the accent on believing in yourself. Believing in yourself. How do you find who is the true you, right? Not like, oh, I'm the best thing after sliced bread, after anything. And that really relates to what Charles Eisenstein said yesterday when you quizzed him about truth. So what is truth? And he said that that's relatedness, right? He said that he didn't really expand on it too much, but as I understood it, for me, that relatedness is relatedness to that pineal gland, to that meditation when I'm so connected to my heart, to that zigzagging of the universe, right? To really find who really am, or at least have a little shimmer of it. And he used this word, that interbeingness. I really like that. But then following that, I thought of interbecomingness, because if we are interbeing, then clearly we influence each other's becoming as well, the way I become. And that's really referring to what you said, that our intention, and then, that how we can really evolve together. And that's all we can do, whether the universe is zigzagging or not. But that's the intention we can put together. So I'd like to have your take on these several thoughts.
Boy. Wow. Well, let me think here. And while I'm thinking, I'd like to hear from the students. So I'd like the doctoral students to put your hands up, because I'd like to hear from a number of you. I want to welcome Angie, by the way. Angie was in our program and is now resuming her studies. I'd love to hear your thoughts, Angie, in a moment, along with the others. But thank you, Georgie. It's Pilate said to Jesus, what is truth? And Jesus didn't answer him. What is love? What is hope? What is justice? These are huge concepts that we intuit, but it's almost impossible to define in words. This is where the great opening line of the Tao Te Ching is so apropos, that the Tao that can be spoken is not the true Tao. And so I want to be very humble in anything that I would say about these kinds of issues. My experience about what truth is, I think for me, truth is a deep, intuitive knowing. And it is not from the brain. It's a knowing, I would say, of the heart, or the gut. It's an alignment, it's a knowing in alignment with natural law. I think people know but I think people are disconnected from their knowing because they're disconnected from nature. They're disconnected. And I fear for the aftermath of the pandemic, because our response to the pandemic is to sever almost every mechanism of human relatedness right now. I'm sitting here in Amsterdam. It's the 9th of June. Since the pandemic started, the first week or so of February, I haven't touched another human being. There's something really wrong with that.
Yeah.
I go outside my apartment and I've got to keep 1.5 meters away from everyone. And you go into these stores and it's marked. And you get any closer than 1.5 meters and all of a sudden people kind of seize up. And so you're always on guard for how you navigate around people. So there's no handshakes, there's no kisses on the cheek, there's no hugs. There's just this bizarre disconnect that everybody is getting used to. And, you know, as Charles said yesterday, and for those of you who didn't hear it, it was a beautiful dialogue with Charles Eisenstein, who's one of the great public intellectuals of our time. He wrote a book called Sacred Economics a number of years ago, and another book called The Ascent of Humanity. It's really, really, you can go up on our YouTube for yesterday, June 8th, and you can, it's worth listening to. It was very, very thoughtful. But he too contemplated the effects of our increasingly living indoors, increasingly living online, increasingly not going out to nature, increasingly engaging in social isolation and distancing, and the effects that that's going to have on our notions of humanity and our notions of truth, because truth is a collective discernment as much as it's an individual discernment. And I think that's why these great books are so inspiring, as you say, that they somehow have a vector into the knowingness of truth. They describe through poetry, song, mythopoetic prose, and the lives of these great personages. And when you read the book, you feel seized, and you know. And that, to me, is the precious encounter that we have with these great books. Like with Joe Dispenza, you finish that book and you know you're your own pharmacy. Now you'll maybe spend years figuring out how to do that, and so forth. But the way the book can confront you is really a powerful thing. So.
Yeah. Thank you. I so agree with you with everything you said. Just going back to on the social distancing, maybe the Dutch are more orderly. Hungarians definitely not. We do hug and kiss now, and absolutely. And hardly anybody keeps the social distancing. And
oh, that's good.
Not really that affected. I think that it's like, I think that no, I don't know generally how many people really kind of that self-observant and self-reflective, but clearly what you were saying about the intuition, that kind of like ring, is this right? Is this right? You question yourself, is this right? And it's like, for me, the hardest was not to hug and kiss my loved ones. And I thought, really, is this right? Is this really, well, we all made of like, you know, viruses and bacteria and like, anyway, but yeah. These are big questions, but clearly I remember that when I read Joe's very first book, I was so inspired. I said, if he can do it, clearly I can do it.
Yeah.
That's inspiration.
Yeah. So,
thank you, Jim.
Good. Thank you. All right, let's get some, I see Anika Eck. And then I want to see this, our doctoral students put their hands up. Anika, please.
Hi. Oops. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I don't know if my camera is on. You can probably just.
No, it's not on. If you go to the bottom left, it'll say there's a little video mute tab and then a video.
Normally, yes. I don't see it. Maybe I entered without.
Yeah, that's
video.
okay. Why don't you just go
Yeah.
ahead?
Yeah,
Just
so
go
I just
ahead.
want to say thank you for your presentation, and I so agree about opening the heart.
Hello.
Opening our heart. Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Open. There you go.
There. Now, good?
No, you had it a second ago.
There. Yes, that's what I thought. That's easier.
There
So
she
I
is.
think we collectively have to open our hearts, and there's some positive signs that that's happening. I think the pandemic is cracking us open, and now with everything that's happening with Black Lives Matter, that like everybody can sense the sacredness of all humanity. And just tying it back to this book, I really like how Joe Dispenza just talks about epigenetics. That's something that is really important to me as a functional nutritionist. That's like one of our biggest toolboxes. And also the difference between Newtonian physics and quantum physics, and that we all have access to that when we go subatomic. And the brain waves you have to be in, just understanding, so you understand why you can't meditate. Like you can sit down and be in the right state of meditation. There's a transition period. I think that's really practical advice. And there be some things, I wish he would talk a little bit more. I find there's a spectrum of, there's so much we can do epigenetically with diet and lifestyle sort of includes meditation and connection to like the whole creation and true alignment. And I think that's where he takes people with his meditations. But I think there is something in there. I find that he himself is an active ingredient in his healings, and that's not really discussed. And because the stories about miraculous healing, it's usually at his workshops, and he was able to heal himself. And I kind of sense the archetype of the magician coming through in him. And I'm not even sure he's aware that he's maybe an active component, ingredient in the healing. So that's one of my comments. But I also think that people should know that they have power, whether they can heal themselves by meditation alone or not. Like everything we do and put into our body, whether it's thought or the stress levels we keep at, is information. And that's where that junk DNA comes in. Whether you have a good like gene, whether you have a SNP where it may have some malfunction or not, if you're able to eat well and sleep well and reduce stress levels, you can still function well with that. And all that is playing out different versions of a gene in the junk DNA, which is the majority of the DNA. And that's really important to know, because that's very empowering to people to know that the genes are not their destiny. But it's on the contrary as well, that if you are not taking care of yourself, even someone with a healthy gene can have it expressed in a way so it becomes diseased.
Yeah.
And just understanding that it's a whole spectrum. And when we take care of ourselves, we bring the environment with us. Because one of the things I focus a lot of is anti-inflammatory, basically eating and living. And I also think that the planet is really inflamed right now. And as we can take care of ourselves, and when we do anti-inflammatory, it's usually also cooling for the planet. So it's we're kind of raising the consciousness collectively together. By taking care of ourselves, we're taking care of the planet.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I know that one of the factors in the healing in the workshops that Dispenza convenes is the collective field. He does a lot of work getting the field, and if you've got, in his case, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 people, in a big ballroom, and they're all meditating at very high heart and brain coherence, you actually create a field.
Mm-hmm.
And that field then empowers everybody to be themselves times themselves. If you're just sitting in your living room in the middle of nowhere, it's just you. But if you're with 1,000 people and they're all doing it at the same time at pretty high levels, you start to have an energy vortex that, and people start to pop, and healing
and I've
starts
actually had a
spontaneously happening.
similar experience with, I do some shamanic training as well. And people do, like at the same time every week from all over, everybody do the meditation together, and you don't have to be in the same room to do this, which is good to know right now. You can create these fields, you know, at a distance as well, with the same intention and attention.
Yeah, good. Well, listen, we've got a number of other hands, so I need to move on. But thank you so much, Anika. Really appreciate your contribution. Good luck.
Thank you.
So we've got, Anne-Marie, then Ingrida, Angie, Margot, Melon, Michelle, and Monique. So we've got about 7 people. And so let's try to be as expeditious as we possibly can. Anne-Marie. Hello, Anne-Marie.
Okay, is that, oh, great. Hello. Yes, I'm Anne-Marie. I'm from Deal in Kent. And I've thoroughly enjoyed this series. And especially this book at this time is really very, very interesting. The whole epigenetics thing is very new to me. But I did go through a whole journey of self-healing some years ago in 2010-11. I healed myself of a sort of early breast cancer. So I'm trying to understand in a way what Joe is saying and how that marries up with my own experience of that. So it's been very interesting. I'm only about halfway through the book at the moment.
Yeah. Oftentimes people heal intuitively and very powerfully like you do. And, you know, reading Joe Dispenza just sort of gives you the physics in some ways after the fact.
Absolutely. Yeah. I did it with voice, but in a way it does. I did it with the sort of into being and into becoming with improvised singing and voice, and singing out the pain, singing out the disease, and going into surrender, but also having some agency. So I can sort of see what he's saying, and I can begin to understand it.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. And by the way, everyone, I encourage you to go on the Great Books group on our Ubiverse. And for example, Anne-Marie would love to have you tell your story on our Ubiverse, you know, because you can upload videos, you can write blogs and so forth. But this would be a very rich discussion to continue with our stories of healing and the challenges of becoming our own placebo. It's very rich. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And thanks for your lecture. Very inspiring.
Thank you. Ingrida. Is Ingrida there?
Hello, do you hear me?
Hello, yeah, we hear you. Go ahead.
Turn your camera on. Turn your camera on, please.
I think I have my camera. Something, maybe something.
Down in the lower left corner. Oh, why don't you go ahead with your question?
Yeah. Ingrida, just go ahead.
Yes, okay. Greetings from Riga, from Latvia. Thank you. Yes. And I can say that I found this book very, very valuable for me. I was lucky. I found it in my own language. And so I could read it faster. It's translated. The books are translated. The few books of Joe Dispenza are translated in Latvian. And I can say that actually I have practiced this kind of meditations and healing for myself for very many years. And I don't use pills. I don't like to go to doctors, but I can heal myself. And here in this book, I really found the scientific justification for everything what I do. So I did it intuitively, and I thought that it's just I can do it, and that's it. But now I see the justification scientifically, and this is the most important thing for me.
Well, thank you. I'm delighted that Dispenza is being translated into Latvian. That's a wonderful thing, and I appreciate your contribution.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Margot.
Oop, I think we got Angie up. I'm sorry.
Oh, Angie.
Hi. Can you guys see me or hear me?
Yeah.
Great. So it's interesting. I was using Dr. Joe's meditations in space about 1.5 years ago, and realizing that space is where my healing takes place. Also, using his space meditation and going into my head and into my heart, I needed to use my body as well. So I started using, I've had childhood abuse, so I was starting to use my body as releasing and wanting to run away, but not doing that as a child, being the good girl and staying. So when I was going through my healing, I was using the space meditation, going deep inside, but also pushing against a wall, pushing against my husband's hands, and just working my body to release that stuck energy in the way that I held it to stay when I was younger. And combining those two really just released so much energy and so much old trauma for me that it was amazing. The third thing I had to look at in myself is the secondary gains. And I think I work with people now, I coach and I help people go through trauma release. I find a lot of my clients won't release, even if they know and they really want to, because they're receiving secondary gains out of their trauma story. So using their trauma story to get sympathy or to incite connection with others has held them in this space of trauma. And once we start to talk about their secondary gains and we look at those and we release those first using you know, his meditations and space and connection, also using the body, releasing those first allows them to get to that real trauma release. So I just wanted to say that he's amazing. I love this book. I find his meditations awesome, and I'm so glad he's here.
Thank you. Good to see you again, Angie. Very good to see you again. And good to see you, Ingrid. We finally got your video on, so it's good to see you. Yeah, I think just to both Ingrid's point and Angie's, and also Anne-Marie, as you just take, we've got just 3 people with 3 different variants of the theme. And that's a very important thing to emphasize here, that healing, while there's universal laws, there's also particular individual tonalities. And I think that is really the key, is how do you adapt the universal to your particular in a way that actually releases either the traumas or the healing energies in a way that actually redeems, in a way that actually heals. And Anne-Marie did it, you did it, Angie, Ingrid. So it's really wonderful to hear these stories. Very, very good. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we have 3 left. Meline and Michelle and Monique.
Margot's up next, Jim.
Okay, Margot. I didn't see that on the list there. Margot, please.
Hi, thank you for choosing this book now.
Perfect book for now, boy.
And this opportunity to be closed into our four walls, or in some people, in your case and in my case, in someone else's walls, and to have only one place to go, which is within. And it's not always fun, but I wouldn't exchange it for anything in the world, because I know it's the right place at the right time. And so as I'm reading Joe Dispenza, I'm finding that it's first of all, it's connecting everything I've always felt and aspired toward inside, from my very early dabblings in herbal medicine and experiences in temples in India. And it's like all kind of coming together. And I love the way that he distills out, first of all, the way that we're blinded by our own subconscious and unconscious, but also what I find in my work, and I think in my own life, is how we are most of the time blinded by and drowning in our own emotion, our stories, our emotions. And what it does is, by giving the scientific view, is that it helps us stand outside of all of the stuff that we drown in, you know, or are doggy paddling in, or treading water in place, and really put it all together. And my question was about psychological content, and I think Angie addressed that very nicely, but that because Joe doesn't really talk about, how do you have to go back through your stories? And obviously my work involves a lot of, past life regression and mindfulness-based psychotherapy, really, sitting with and standing outside of and allowing to heal our content, our psychological content. And I'm wondering, can we just see it from the scientific view and like burst our way past it, or do we? How does Joe see it? How do you see his teaching?
Well, that's a very good question. I would say, based on my exposure so far, I would say Dispenza leaves all that behind. For him, it's about sensing future possibilities, living into the future, feeling the emotions you would feel when your future is fulfilled, but you feel them now. So you're living in the abundance of fulfillment, focusing on future possibilities. I think for Joe Dispenza, past life regression and psychotherapy and psychoanalysis and all these things where you go through your trauma and speak to it, release. I think it's not that it's a waste of time. I think he would honor it and say that's important if it's your pathway. But for him, the healing, which is what he's focused on, comes from a different place.
Yeah.
And, that's the great critique of Freudian and Jungian therapy that began to surface at the end of the 20th century. People were saying, listen, we've had 75 years of psychoanalysis and the world is worse, not better. So just talking about stuff does not mean you're going to heal. You may kind of feel better at the end of a 60-minute session, but is the world getting better or is it getting worse? What's wrong with this picture, as it were? So I think Dispenza is in a different school, which isn't to negate any of the other schools. It's just to say that his tonality, his emphasis is on setting clear intentions about the future, and then having elevated emotions in the present about how would you feel if the future had already happened. And that if you live in that way, the past will just naturally fall away. That would be my...
It's the single most empowering concept. It's changing everything. It's wonderful.
Yeah. It's changing everything for me too. I sort of think of my life pre-Dispenza and post-Dispenza. Because, you know, I just to take a moment on it, I'm a missionary kid. I had to fight my way through Christianity. And with all the jargon, you got to be in Jesus, and you got to, go into heaven, and you're evil, and you got to fight your way through that. And what Dispenza offers is a clean, precision, physics-based way to understand what all of us are desperately seeking, and that is a life of abundance and wholeness, a life of healing. And so I'm finding through his work huge rejuvenation of my soul and my meditative practice. Like, for example, my meditative practice was all about attention. I was following my breath, following my mantra, doing all this stuff. And he says, hey, man, it's about awareness. Relax into the void. Have your attention in the field of awareness. And I'd really not grappled with that thought the way I did after, doing the progressive workshop that he offers. So anyway, thank you, Margot. It's always such a pleasure. By the way, I got your paper last week. I'll try to get to it this weekend. All right, who's next there, Rick?
They'll pop up in a second. I forgot. It should be there any moment. Somebody, I don't know where they went.
Is Michelle or Monique?
I'm here.
Oh, there she is.
Hi. Sorry, I forgot I had this on. I'm at work and I have to wear this on my face for a mask. Thank you. I'll be very brief. My name is Malin. I actually work in psychiatric rehab, so on psychiatric treatment. So this is what you were just saying is very, very relevant. And my big question in even wanting to pursue this course of study is coming from the place of I don't see the mind healing the mind, and I don't think it's actually the avenue through which the divided mind experiences healing. And I think Joe in this book, Dr. Joe, sorry, he expresses through science just why we can't just fix the mind with the mind, that we must access the body resources and intelligence, that we must access the heart emotions and intelligence, that we must access healing through infinity, use the word infinity or creation or the void. We must access healing from that space, because that's actually the space from which we originate, and its creation occurs from the eternal, and actually, kind of slows into form so that we can experience it. And I don't know if you're familiar with a man named Neville Goddard. He was an amazing, I believe he was someone, he died in the late 60s. So he was before then, and he basically used the Bible and Christianity, and I feel had a fully awakened awareness of the truth of the Bible and what it was meant. And he teaches something that you almost said earlier, Jim, is he teaches imagining the wish fulfilled. And he talks about, he always refers to the wonderful human imagination, that is through the avenue through which we are made to experience life, that is God source, that is the will of existing. And he gives his practice is actually quieting the mind and imagining the final scene of the wish fulfilled, which is exactly what Joe is invoking in his meditations, is this practice of getting as deeply ingrained into this wish fulfilled state, this final scene where I'm healed, where I'm healthy, where whatever, and feeling that, and how would you celebrate? If you could suddenly walk again, what would you do? How would you celebrate? Who would you tell? Who would you call? What would you do? And immersing yourself emotionally into that as much as possible, and going back and going back and going back. And he was saying, and you just continue to do that until it feels normal, until it feels so true that you don't have to imagine it anymore, because then it's already like felt in you, and then like let it go. And it's basically the process of manifestation, right? You can use that word too. It's a process of creation. It's exactly what Joe is talking about, pairing, the mind is brilliant and able to hold these concepts, but it's only with the union of the soul that creation and birth can occur. And I think that it's just brilliant to see another healer like him functioning on the level that he does amongst, many people and, across the planet that are also offering healing. And I've really enjoyed it. And I'm really enjoyed the confirmation and the challenge laid out in the book for my own self and in my own practice. So
great. Well, thank you. Thank you. I wish we had more time. I'd love to hear your experiences as a psychotherapist as you're navigating and your patients are navigating through the pandemic. I mean, that's a whole other conversation, but it's probably a very, very interesting one.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, good luck to you. You're one of the front line responders, I'm afraid. So thank you for everything that you're doing.
Yeah.
Michelle's up next, Jim.
Okay, Michelle and then Monique.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Melaine.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hello.
Hi. I'm in Hawaii. For me, with this book, I loved hearing the languaging of experience for the experience that I already had as well. I was in the hospital for 1.5 years with a TBI, and having many teams of doctors around me talking about me and how I would be a vegetable, and knowing that that wasn't true, and going in and creating collateral sprouting and healing in my own brain. So it was lovely to have the language and the science that I've been on the journey of. I love the sweet spot of the soul and the science for communication and sharing. It's one thing to have an experience yourself, but to be able to share it, and you can bring that sweet spot to people. I love that. But with this book, as with everything, what is a book? For me, what I would...
You're breaking up. Maybe turn your video off.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So for me, what I would add to the list of great books, it's always a book that invokes a remembering, like right. So this is one of those books. Yeah. It absolutely brings in a remembering, even though I've been through the experience, it deepens and brings language to that aspect of what I am and what I'm capable of. And it doesn't stop there for me, though. Yes, I have a full pharmacy inside of me. I know that. I've played with it. I've implemented it. It doesn't mean, for me, it's always the intention behind and for the highest and best of all. So just because I can access this pharmacy and I really can produce anything I want through that pharmacy at any point, am I meant to? And so I've been playing, again, with this book of what is healing. Remembering you can heal is important, but divine timing, what am I meant to do, and how, is resolving something within me in the moment actually going to benefit the highest and best good of all? Is it actually going to bring myself into greater expansiveness? Because it could be very easy to just keep playing chemistry. And so I'm just sitting with that question of the why, as with, because I can manipulate universal law, intention, and mood.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Michelle. Appreciate that comment. Yeah, you know that there's Chronos time, the clock, and there's Kairos time in the fullness and right timing. So you're absolutely right that you don't want to become a magician that just can manipulate chemistry. You want to be a whole human being that is healing for the right reasons in the right moment, in a way that is redemptive. So I think you're making an extremely important point. And also, you know, to Melane's point earlier about, you know, this gentleman that she knew in relationship to remembering. You know, that's all we're doing is remembering. All Joe Dispenza is doing is remembering in a fresh way. And he's putting the most ancient awareness that human beings have had coming out of ancient India and, you know, the Siberian steppes of the shamans in the language of physics. But every great healer has known that. And so that's important to remember as well, that there's nothing new under the sun. It's just rediscovered in fresh ways. And Dispenza's done that, again, using the language of science for these ancient mystical truths. So thank you. It was a very, very mature perspective that you're carrying. I appreciate it. Now, I think we've got Monique. Is Monique ready, or did she disappear?
I'm ready.
Oh, good. Monique, you're the last one. Thank you.
All right, well, I'll try to make it brief. I'll see over time. It actually links on what you've just said. Yeah, many years ago, I lived and trained in the Amazon with a tribe of people as an ayahuasca shaman. So as I'm going through the book and as I'm doing the meditations, I'm more and more reminded of some of the synergies. So I guess my comment comes from not as a person that takes ayahuasca, but from the shaman directing a ceremony perspective. In my apprenticeship, shaman apprenticeship, one of the things they taught me was that the pineal gland in modern humans, that's their perspective, the pineal gland in modern humans is much smaller than it ought to be. It's supposed to be much bigger. And while you can take ayahuasca or entheogens or whatever to heal physical ailments and emotional hurts, you can also use it for spiritual expansion to take the pineal gland up to about that size, which is what it should be. So that's their belief. And they also believe, and this is, and I know that ingesting entheogens is obviously not a placebo, but they also believe that as you work with the entheogens, you eventually should not need it at all and be able to get the same effect, which ultimately now with the placebo meditations and things like that is doing it without an entheogen, but also the purpose of working with the entheogens is to not need it in the end. So some of the things that I find was also very strongly correlated in a ceremony and in directing a ceremony and working with people and directing the energy is when I speak to my shaman brothers and sisters in the language that they speak, we speak about the wheels. And it's almost like a watch, like a clock, the different gears of a clock that needs to align. And a big part of that, regardless of what the healing is that people need, a very big part of that, what I've often found in all my ceremonies is it touches on, in the language of that you've been using, the magnetism of the heart, the wheel of the magnetism of the heart, and the electromagnetism of the thoughts, and how to get those things just aligned. And the ceremony creates a space, or the entheogen opens up the space, creates the spaciousness. It's about getting the hope and the belief that something can actually happen on an energetic level. And what I found over time is the second those wheels sync is when the person actually has a breakthrough and a permanent change happens. So I find the correlation between all these things very interesting. And another thing that I've also been thinking about is, from a consciousness perspective, the different ways in which to move awareness in order to get into the spaciousness and then connect to the void, and how that connects to Turiya and the fifth state of consciousness. And where for me, in my personal experience with the meditation, it's not about necessarily the physical healing of things, but it's going into different places that yeah, it's got more to do with states of consciousness necessarily than to create something or to change a belief. So I'm still playing with that. But anyway, that's where my thoughts are around this.
Well, thank you. You're taking us into deep territory with the entheogens and with the really what Don Juan called sorcerer's knowledge that impacts the biochemistry of our bodies in such a way to produce illumination. You know, I've done a couple of ayahuasca journeys and have been blown away and completely reoriented. And I think those shamans are right, Monique. I think we've got, you know, pineal glands the size of a grain of rice because we haven't been using it for 2,000 years in the West.
Exactly what they say.
If this culture was honoring the dreams, honoring the intuitive self, honoring the mystical, the non-ordinary, using entheogens to train people in the mystical arts, if we were all meditating, if we were all concentrating on our pineal glands, I bet you they would be, you know, much bigger than they currently are. I mean, I've only been really working on them for, you know, just sort of months. And I can feel more and more comfortable with my awareness in that part of my brain. And I know perfectly well that the pineal gland is getting activated. You know, I've been getting up in the middle of the night because the pineal gland is the most active between 1 and 4 a.m. And, you know, you start doing that day in and day out, or night in and night out. And pretty soon it begins to change your chemistry. And so I really acknowledge that. You know, I always go back to Stan Grof. He says, "What if you could do one thing that would change the world? What would it be?" He says, "Give everybody a tab of acid." You know, that if we were all taking entheogens in an intelligent, caring way, we were teaching our young people to ingest entheogens within a meditative practice and within, you know, rites of passage that actually means something to youth coming of age. We would not only have larger pineal glands, we would have a much more mature, loving, heartful culture. And so this work, and with this I conclude because we're over time, this work is not just about becoming your own pharmacy. This work is about becoming who you were destined to be. It's about becoming your fullness, because the more heart coherence, the more brain coherence, the more body coherence, blessing your energy centers, blessing your chakras, the more time you're feeling yourself, the more extraordinary your life is going to become. And if you're harnessing your clear intention about who you want to be in the future, because Georgie was right, it's about becoming. We're not only belonging together, we're becoming together. And just to take another minute on it, because it's really important for Humanity Rising, I, in my psyche, am starting to think, where do I want the world to be by 2030? The scientists are telling us we've got 10 years. I never really kind of thought about 2030 till the last couple of months. And then all of a sudden I realized, as I was creating the intention for Humanity Rising in my body and soul, I began to realize I needed to imagine something real. How can we so interact with the culture that by 2030, we can stand together saying we saved humanity in its most critical moment? Can we live with that vision day by day by day? Can we fill it with elevated emotions? That we've been honored, chosen to be alive during this time. I can't think of a moment in all of human history where more has been at stake. Everything that we revere hangs in the balance. And somehow we've got to activate the powers, the superhuman inside all of us to make a difference, not only to ourselves, but to the world. Because we're entering the most important decade in history. So Joe Dispenza's book about you being the placebo isn't just about you manufacturing aspirin. It's about you transforming your life, me transforming my life, so that we can become more effective instruments of service. That's the bottom line. So anyway, I got carried away here at the end. But thank you, everyone. Deeply appreciate this conversation. If you want to continue it, let's continue it on the Ubiverse. There's a group on the great books, and let's meet there. And then next month, we're going to have Kayleen Asbo, extraordinary woman, speak to us about the gospel of the compassion of Mary Magdalene. We're going to have 2 extraordinary sessions by a woman who probably understands Mary Magdalene as much, if not more deeply, than anybody alive. Mary Magdalene, who probably had more to do to activate the ministry of Jesus and shape the early church than any of the other disciples, and was written out of history because she was a woman. She's back. And, Kayleen Asbo is going to tell us about her. So anyway, thank you, everybody. We'll meet again in a month's time. Bye-bye.